Welcome back to Main Street Living. Well, guys, over the last few weeks, emotions have been flying, and rightfully so.
Absolutely, Cheryl. In fact, recently David Chappelle released a new comedy special. But coming from a person in that same profession and also feeling the effects of these turbulent times, it sure felt like we were watching like a therapy session, right? so,
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Much needed.
yeah,
Yeah.
and in fact, our next guest is with us today is Nancy Ryan. She's a licensed marriage family therapist, certified Gottman therapist, and CEO of the Relationship Therapy Center. Welcome to the show, there, Nancy.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I notice in your background, you have love. That is what we need, period.
Yeah,
Just love to calm things down. How can you,
absolutely.
yeah, like how do you explain people trying to cope with these recent tragedies, including the death of George Floyd and COVID-19?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what we were seeing with COVID-19 is a lot of anxiety and, people kind of trapped in place, a lack of community, if you will. And then we saw the horrific death of George Floyd, and it just brought, I think, a sense of community to people in some way. There was such a sense of powerlessness and outrage that it connected people in some ways.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Especially when you see something as visual as that, and then it gets played out, and then there's a lot of like a good section of people who had never seen that, and then there was a section of us who had always seen images of that, and it just gets ignored. So,
yeah.
like, why do you think it's so upsetting to so many people, and they're not even personally connected to the victim?
Yeah, and I think there is, I mean, that was so visual and so graphic. And COVID-19, although that seemed to kind of split the country to some degree in a lot
Hmm.
of ways. And this was just, I think it's a sense of anger, of powerlessness. So we've been powerless through the COVID-19, and then seeing this, I think people feel like they can come to the anger is motivating them to some kind of resolution, right? It's like, okay, we can do something about this. And so you're seeing people all over the place jump on this where they might not have before. So
Right.
yeah, it's a good thing, really.
Yeah, yeah, and the fact that people all over, not just in the United States, but all over the world, have been moved to protest. So,
Yeah.
is that a certain trigger because of what has happened that just moved people who hadn't been affected to start protesting?
Yeah, it is the sense of, I think, what do we do with our anger? I mean, that drives people angry. And if you're on social media today, there is all kinds of anger being processed. It's so funny
Mhm.
that you mentioned my sign, because I'll just say, I choose love. Like behind every argument, I choose love, right? Because it's just polarizing for everybody. So I think part of the protests are bringing people together, but it's something we can do with our anger, right? In peaceful
Yeah.
protests and making changes that are effective, I think are really what's needed now.
Right. Like how can we, channel our anger in ways that can produce results, either in society or within ourselves?
Yeah. So anger is an emotion, and there's nothing wrong with anger. And I think it's what we do with the anger that becomes the problem. And so feeling the anger and in ourselves personally and figuring out a way to process that, which can be physical exercise. I mean, it's an emotion that needs to move through the body, or a punching bag, or writing things down. But when it's used to attack other people or
Mhm.
do things that are destructive, it's not helping anybody. So I think if you can mobilize it, like I think about Mark Klass when his daughter was murdered, like he became a child advocate. He helped change the law. He started speaking out for other people that had tragedies happen, and he used that anger and that outrage in a positive way. I'd love
Okay.
to see more people doing that than just screaming and yelling at each other or hurting each other.
Absolutely, and that is definitely the solution. And before we go, how can people contact you for more information or just for a therapy session? Because I feel like just how smooth your voice is, I feel calm right now.
Good, good. I have that effect on people. So you can visit us at therelationshiptherapycenter.com. And if you're in California, we see people virtually all over.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being part of the show today. And we definitely
Yeah,
look for people to keep sharing love like you have behind you. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Thanks for having me.